Ladies and gentlemen, good evening and welcome back to my regular Sports File podcasts on my YouTube channel. Today, we're going to take a very unique look at probably one of the most underrated NHL hockey players of the 1970s and well into the 1980s. Now, for the modern generation or not Montreal Canadiens fans, this name is not going to ring too many bells, but for anybody over the age of 40 who's followed the Montreal Canadiens throughout the years, this name will make you smile and make you tell stories about how good he was. Now, Stephen John Shutt, better known as Steve Shutt, is a former five-time Stanley Cup winner for the Montreal Canadiens. He was born July 1st, good Canada Day boy, 1952. Played 12 years for the Cabs and finished out his career in a one-year tenure with the LA Kings. Now, Shutt was not what you call a huge player, average size 5'11", 180, but he became almost a complete danger on the left wing with the Habs, mostly playing with Guy Lafleur and Jacques Lemaire, of course, Peter Mahalder as well. Now, he ended up being drafted by Montreal, fourth overall in the 1972 entry draft. Now, he became recognized in an early part of his life for his outstanding play in minor hockey events, including the 64 and 65 Quebec International Pee Wee hockey tournaments, where he represented squads from Toronto. Now, at the time when he was playing with Lemaire and Lafleur, they became the top line in the NHL on what was the top team of the 70s and arguably the greatest dynasty of all time. Especially in 1977, the year that Montreal won 60 games and ended up with the greatest total of points and wins in the regular season and playoffs. He also became the first left winger in NHL history to score 60 goals in a single season, with the historic counter coming against the Washington Capitals on April 3rd, 1977. But we'll get back to the legend of the 60 goals very soon, but I just wanted to talk about some of his career accomplishments and highlights. Now, during his career with Montreal, he was named to the first All-Star team in that 77 year, second All-Star team in 78 to 1980. But Shutt's basic thing for a lot of people, they call them now garbage goals. I don't call them garbage goals. But because he was such a small player like Brendan Gallagher and Matt Snaslin, also two epic Habs that have played with Montreal for a number of years, he had average skating ability, but he had an uncanny awareness around the net. He was in the right position at the right time, and he's kind of the guy that invented getting kind of the tying or leading goal and the go ahead goal. His two game a goal pace at certain times was legendary because what Lafleur would miss, Shutt would get in. And as Ken Dryden quoted him very directly in that great book, The Game, he talked about Lafleur one night and he said, "Oh, he's ready but not too ready. There'll be rebounds tonight." But it was not just rebounds. He would be dangerous within that what Phil Esposito called a slot. Now, he would also score on a very impressive snap and slap shot here and there, but within 30 feet of the net, if he had a chance to put it in, 90% of the time he would. Now, he had impressive accuracy, and he kind of invented his own way of hitting the five hole, which a lot of players have kind of mimicked over the years. Now, talking about his early career, he was in the Metropolitan JHL early part of his career, but ended up with the Toronto Marlboros. And his big season with the Marlies, of course, was that infamous 70-goal season in 62 games in 1971. He spent some time with the Voyageurs before moving up to the big club. But we're seeing his progression in these early years. He won a cup in 73 in Montreal, only scored 8 goals, didn't play much in the playoffs. But the time the 74 and 75 season came about, he was taking a more direct route to that 60-goal mark. 15 in 74, 30 in 75. Scored a big goal in the finals against the Flyers in 76. He had 45 goals in the regular season and 15 points in the playoffs. But what made it impressive with that 77 season was the 60 goals. Very few of that goals, and I saw a lot of the goals he scored that year as a young Montreal fan growing up in northern New Brunswick. 90% of those goals the goalie had no chance. There was very few garbage goals. But the big problem with Steve Shutt, and he said this, I think, to Brian McFarland, when he tailed off the next year, he only scored 49. Well, he said, in Montreal, when you score 60, you won 70 the next year. But imagine going to a modern player and said, oh, you only got 49 goals this year. And that's what he did in 78. But he was still consistently that 35, 45 goal range up until 1983, when unfortunately injuries kind of took away his kind of last impressive tenure with Montreal. And that tenure in 84, of course, was the upset of the Nordiques in the playoff round, where the infamous St. Patrick's Day Massacre game where he scored twice. And he had some big goals in the playoffs that year, 7 goals and 2 assists, 11 games. But by the time 85 came around, with the house cleaning in Montreal, with Lafleur, with some of the older players, he was eventually casted off to the Kings. He ended his career with 41 points in his final season. His grand totals, almost a point a goal pace, 930 games, 817 points total, 424 goals, with an impressive, again, point a goal pace, point a game pace in the playoffs, with 99 games with 98 assists and an even 50 goals. Now, when he retired, he worked as an assistant coach to Mario Tremblay for a short while. He basically he joined a company called Tormont Industries as manager of recreational facilities and services. He was there for years. Now, he also was part of probably the best Team Canada of all time, which arguably is the 1976 Canada Cup squad, where he played in 6 games with 3 points. 87 was really good for Team Canada, but 76 was just tremendous talent, because you had the best of the Flyers and Boston and the Rangers and Montreal and Chicago and the Kings and all the elite players that excelled in the early 70s, but well into the the late 70s. They had everybody but Gretzky. They even had Bobby Orr playing, and Steve Shutt said the greatest distinction where, Team Canada 72, Orr was injured, he couldn't play. And to see what Bobby Orr did to play on those crippled knees and those games impressed him so much. But one thing I want to tell you about Steve Shutt, and this is just a personal reflection. There's no player like Steve Shutt in the NHL anymore. He was kind of like a jokester, but not like a negative jokester like Peter Mahovlich. Obviously, we don't want to get too much on the Mary Tremblay situation. But Steve Shutt, the way he was quoted in the game, and some of the media have told me through the years, what you saw there was a person who just was glad to be there. But you can imagine, there was no pressure on Shutt compared to Guy Lafleur. Guy was carrying a whole country in Quebec and another whole country in Montreal. And Steve Shutt was the happy-go-lucky guy that, like the drinking buddy kind of style. But all I'm saying for the young people that might be listening to this podcast who've never seen Steve Shutt play, see some of the highlights, especially some of the compilation games in the late 70s against the Red Wings, the Kings, Vancouver in the mid-70s, especially Game 4 against the Flyers in 76. Some people complain, well, if that was Bernie Parent, he could have stopped Shutt, but, Shutt once said it doesn't matter what the goalie is. If I get the puck, it's going to go in the net. But what was strange about Steve Shutt, like I said, some people overrate him, some people underrate him, some people look at him as just right. And I looking at him as a person that I don't think they would have won 4 straight cups between 76 and 79 without him. I think 1975, if he played better, or the Habs would have played better against Buffalo, that would have been, their cup. So technically, 2 of those cups belong to Shutt. Because when Dryden in 79, when he was getting worse and he couldn't rely on Larocque to take up the load, Lafleur was basically his off-ice problems were growing. Robinson was getting a little bit older in the tooth and disgruntled. Lapointe was getting injured a lot. Steve Shutt was that stalwart, that 35 to 50 goal guy. So, ladies and gentlemen, thanks for listening, and we're going to keep you updated on our sports podcasts. My regular podcast with the members of the Brunswick Independent Authors Association will also continue, and my TV and movie podcast will also resume. Sorry I was away for a while, but my computer was working very crappily for the last couple of months, but we got that fixed, so I'm glad to be back. As we like to say in Canterbury, New Brunswick, all the way to Gravel Hill in the North Shore, keep your stick on the ice, and if you see Steve